Well, hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Continence Chat. I'm here with my colleague, Susie, and we have a very special guest today that I think we're going to have some good content, some good dialogue to talk about. I'd like to introduce everybody to Juanita Benedict. So she has a doctorate in physical therapy, and she also owns her own practice, Athena Pelvic Therapy. And I loved her tagline, which is hope, help, and healing. And so on that note, do you mind just sharing a little bit about your background, your practice? And my goodness, you mirror incontinence topics with what you're doing. So I think we're gonna, there'll be no shortage of discussion.
I think probably the opposite will be true. We'll have a whole lot, but to jam into 30 minutes. So sure. I was in my 30s and decided that I needed a career after my kids got, graduated from school, and I was a little concerned. They were still young at the time, but I'm always thinking 10, 15 years ahead. And I thought it's a crazy way how I came about being a physical therapist, but I had to work really hard because I avoided the classes like the plague that would require me to get into PT, science, the math, all of that stuff. So I had to go back and do all that. But anyway, I was in my 30s and I was in PT school. I already had my children, and I actually had issues with what's called stress incontinence. Whenever you laugh, cough, or sneeze, you have a little bit of leakage there. We had one person come in and lecture, and she talked about how physical therapy can help reduce that and help solve that. And I said, no way, I cannot believe that this can be solved, because you don't always hear that. And so it was at that point that I started counting how many of my friends also had the same issue. And I said, well, this is my path. And so then after I got my doctorate, I went on for further training to learn a lot more about pelvic therapy, and just realized that this was just this is where I needed to be, and started my journey towards opening Athena Pelvic Therapy here in Claremont. So we've been in business. This is 5 years now. We've been around and growing every year, and just wonderful opportunities to get to educate the community as well as meet wonderful people like you. And I say, preach the gospel of pelvic therapy.
Yeah, great. And for those viewers that may not know what that term means, in layman's terms, what is pelvic therapy?
So all physical therapists work with the musculoskeletal system as well as the nervous system. We have just different systems in our bodies. Pelvic floor therapy, it's a great question that you ask, because there's a lot of confusion around it. Just the name itself, pelvic floor. Sometimes people will think that we actually do the exercises on the floor, which I've had a lot of people ask me that question, so I can understand why that's the case. But our pelvic muscles are actually at the bottom of our body. Actually, I'm going to look at the skeleton right here. So our pelvic, Sam will be useful here. So our pelvic muscles are right here at the bottom. So that's why they're called the floor muscles, or the pelvic floor muscles. So as a pelvic floor therapist, we just specialize in those muscles and getting them to work. There's a lot of complexity around them, but we look at getting those muscles working along with the other systems like breathing and your hip muscles, and getting everything to work together the way that it should naturally. But sometimes it just goes off track. So that's the specialty. In a couple of words, I always say I work with the ins and the outs. So that's basically what we do.
Gotcha.
And would this involve women only, and what ages?
No, it's actually men. And I treat men, women, and even sometimes children, and all ages. So probably my youngest has been 4 and my oldest has been 100. So pretty much the entire lifespan. Of course, we have different issues at different points in our lifespan and what's happening. But that's, yeah. Wow. We can have all kinds of different things going on.
Yeah. Are there other, so I know we're on Continence Chat. Susie and I work for Seni, which is high performing adult incontinence products. So when we think pelvic floor, we go right to, probably, Susie, I shouldn't speak for you, but I go right to bladder leaks and helping to reduce those, if not have them gone altogether would be wonderful for people, but at least reduce them. Pelvic floor therapy, are there other conditions that pelvic floor therapy helps with?
Oh, yes. So in addition to bladder control, right, one of the problems that can confound bladder control or make it more difficult to control your bladder is if you have constipation. So we also help with people who have constipation, because with constipation, the rectum or the colon can push on the bladder, and it can make it feel like you need to go. So we help with the constipation too. Any kind of sexual function as well, for men and women. Pelvic pain, lots of reasons. Pelvic pain is really complex, so there's lots of reasons people can have pelvic pain. Again, that really is any age group that you can start having pelvic pain, and it can be very debilitating. So we'll work with that. Digestive issues in general, those are the outs that I was talking about when I say I work with the ins and the outs. Okay. So sometimes some digestion problems can be helped a lot with pelvic therapy. Sometimes chronic back pain or hip pain. So if you've gone through regular therapy and maybe you've gotten a little bit of relief, but there's not a lot of relief, and maybe you have some incontinence or you're constipated a lot, maybe there's something else going on there. Pelvic floor therapy can help with those kind of things too, that we normally think of as just regular therapy, but maybe there's something else going on if you're not getting the results that you need.
Gotcha.
I noticed on your website, Juanita, that you made reference to deep hip pain, and I was trying to figure out how is all that connected?
Oh, the deep hip pain. So actually, can I show you a model? Can I take a second and grab something?
Absolutely.
Okay,
absolutely.
Hold on. Okay. I have lots of pelvises in my room. I just didn't have any handy. So this is a model of a female pelvic floor, and we're just going to look on the inside here. So those are the muscles. Those are the pelvic floor muscles that we were talking about, the ones that control continence and bowel movements as well as sexual function. They're on the outside and inside, but we're just going to look on the inside. But what's interesting, you can see they line the entire pelvis. But what's super interesting is this muscle right here is actually a hip muscle. So it's called your obturator internus. Don't worry, there's not going to be a quiz, or I'm not going to give you one. Maybe you guys will. But it's a hip rotational muscle. So every time you take a step, it has to activate. But you can see how closely related it is to the pelvic muscles. And in reality, they share a lot of structures. So fascial structures and nervous structures, they share a lot. So if something's going on with your pelvic floor muscles, then it can affect your hips, and it will feel really deep inside. But if it affects this muscle, it affects all of your hip muscles. And so that's what we're talking about when we're talking about like deep hip pain, is that muscle specifically in there.
Wow. I'm so glad that you answered that question, because it's interesting, because I think a lot of people, even myself, right? When I think, as I just mentioned, pelvic floor therapy, my mind goes to one area. But now I see why your demographic of people that seek help can be 4 to 100 males, females. There's so many different areas to touch on that I bet people aren't even aware of.
It's true.
Yeah. How do you go about, outside of Continence Chat, and I know I get a very nice newsletter, how do you go about getting that information out? Because I think, boy, the people that you are helping and the potential to help even more people has got to be an infinite number.
It is a lot. It's really interesting. When I first started my practice, when I started here in Claremont, I started going to a lot of the business networking groups. Now, business networking groups are fantastic, but then we have an opportunity to speak. So when I had an opportunity to speak, I am not talking about washing windows or doing selling things. So I took those opportunities to educate people, because that's really my forte anyway. Is I love to educate people, because the body's just amazing and fascinating, and people have a lot of questions that they don't always want to ask, especially in a group of people. So I got some really interesting comments, always good comments, but very interesting ones when I first started. So I try to do a lot of community education. If people, I'll be invited to come and do talks, which I'm happy to do. And being on a fantastic podcast like you guys, is a great thing. The good news is that pelvic floor therapy now is becoming sort of it's just very out there. When I started practicing 15 years ago, like nobody even knew what pelvic floor therapy was at all. And now with a lot of social media, there's a lot of other pelvic floor therapists out there generating some really good content and information too. So I get to benefit even from their work, which sounds crazy, but it's true. I mean, there's only so much you can do in a day. So it's nice to be a part of a community that you can refer people to. But yeah, every month we deliver a newsletter trying to provide really practical information about the pelvic floor and just how your body reacts and reacts and uses the pelvic floor in everyday ways, and some things you can watch out for and be careful for, and things that you may not think are associated with the pelvic floor that really may be.
That's wonderful. Go ahead, Susie.
What can someone expect when they come to your location?
As far as so the first thing we do is we do an exam. So we'll have somebody come in. The exam, and every pelvic floor therapist is different. So I'll tell you my process, but again, everybody is different for different reasons. But when someone comes in, the first thing I want to do is I want to actually hear what's going on. Unfortunately, in our medical system, people don't get heard as much as they should be. They're told a lot and not heard. So I like to listen to the stories and what's really happening and how things are affecting people's lives. And, it depends on man or woman, how much information I get. Sometimes I have to ask more questions and pry in. But I just want to hear what's going on and get some medical history and those kind of things. Then I provide some education. We'll bring out Sam and my posters here and my models, and we'll talk about, possibly what are some things that are happening. But I want people to walk out of here with a lot more knowledge about their body than when they came in. So we'll do that, and then we'll do some testing. We'll look at your hips. We'll look at your alignment. We'll take a look at your intestines and your breathing, and then if it's okay with the patient, we'll do an internal exam so that we can see if those muscles are working properly. Are they contracting? Are they too tight? Are they relaxing? Are they just coordinated enough? Are they working well with other muscles? So there's just a lot to look at with regard to that. And then after that, I answer any questions and give them their first bit of homework and send them on their way.
Wow. And do you have any stories with, obviously we never want to violate HIPAA,
For sure.
but are there any stories just in general where I think people love to hear the good stories type of thing, where someone came in at point A and then worked through and left at point C with the result being a wow factor, a good factor, or back to quality of life factor?
I have so many stories, but since this is Continence Chat, let me focus on one in particular. It actually isn't, it's my story, but I wasn't the treating therapist. I was a student still at the time. And my CI or clinical instructor, she had a new exam. So a new patient came in, and the patient was sitting there. She was, I believe, in her 80s, late 70s, early 80s, and she was sitting there. And this is just so, it's tattooed in my brain. I'll never forget this. She was sitting there and she was talking to my instructor, and she's just crying. She's crying because she has to go to the bathroom every 10 to 15 minutes. And she's the main caregiver of her husband, who was ill, and he couldn't get up and move around. So she had to do everything. She couldn't even go to the grocery store, right? Because she was leaking so much and just did not feel in control at all of her body. And here, of course, she's responsible for her husband too. Just the stress and everything that was involved with that was just significant. And I remember my clinical instructor, who was a doctor of physical therapy too, she reached over and she just patted her on the knee and said, "We're going to take care of you." And I was like, well, that's a big promise. It's a big promise to tell somebody that. And I was a little nervous, but within a few weeks, I think it was like 4 to 6 visits, she was completely continent. Now, that doesn't happen with everybody, right? It depends on what was going on. But for her, she was completely continent. And she regained so much control of her life. I mean, think about now she's able to go to the grocery store and get the milk and the eggs and take care of her husband and do the laundry and all of these things that were hindered before because she felt like she had to go to the bathroom every 10 minutes. I can't even imagine what that was like. And so it was just such a beautiful story. And I have stories of my own very similar to that in different things, right? With pelvic pain, with constipation, with incontinence, with digestive issues, all of these things. And it's just I feel very humbled and honored to be able to do what I do, because it really has a deep impact on the lives of people, just like you guys with your products too, right? Because if people don't feel safe going out and feel like they're going to have accidents, and sometimes, again, it depends on what's going on. People need, products. And if they don't feel safe going out, then that really has a major detrimental effect on their lifestyle, not to mention just feeling like you're not in control. And there's nothing worse than not feeling like you're in control or able to control your body. So those are a few stories, or a story.
Yeah.
I could sit here all day and tell you stories. So.
Yeah. No, and it ties back so much. Again, I go back to your tagline, where I always call it deep in the weeds. Until people are truly deep in the weeds with incontinence, I don't think people truly understand the negative implications that can come along with it. Social isolation, not wanting to go out. I always compare it, for those that are continent, I always say to people, picture if you had a bug, 24-hour bug, and I say this all the time, we were going to go shopping for the day. I might not share a lot of details, or maybe I will, right? Those people that share a lot but I might say, you know what, Juanita, Susie, I got a bug. Let's go out next. Well, people that have deep in the weeds incontinence, they are living that bug every single day of their lives. So I think it's critical work of for sure, of what you're doing out there. It's amazing work, and kudos. I have a question for you.
Okay.
People here, I wanted 2 points I'm going to make here. One of the things ties back to Seni, believe it or not from an incontinence product perspective, but do you happen to know Dr. Rosemary Layard? She used to manage the memory care centers in Central Florida. I was just wondering, through the networking events that in the past.
I don't believe so. Maybe I have met her, but it's been a while since I've been in the loop of that.
In the loop. And I know we had the 3 years of COVID too. So, yeah. But she is a Seni advocate and actually created our acronym, so to speak, for what we call our Seni selection tool. So if you look at the letters of Seni, S is for sizing, regarding hips and waist for a person who may need a product. E is for evaluate their mobility. Are they active? Are they bed bound? Essential features ties in with the E. N is for night or day products. We're a very person-centered approach to continence care. But the I is what I'm getting at, because it ties with what you do, where I feel that we work together with pelvic floor therapy in the sense of I is for improve continence first. That's always our mission as well, to hopefully in a perfect world, Susie and I'd be working for another channel of our parent company versus incontinence products. So we align with the work that you're doing to improve. That was kind of point number one. But then my question about Kegel exercises, because we hear the term, and again, I don't think a lot of people, I don't want to make assumptions, but I think there's a big enough group out there. Curious, in layman's terms, if you're able to delicately describe, what are we talking about? We hear the term Kegel exercises. Are they for everyone? And what is a good age to be mindful or even educate others? Like I think of, you've got elementary, junior high, high school, college, young adult. What's that age group of where people should be more mindful about them?
Oh, okay. Well, I'm going to try to to be concise here. Okay. I'll do my best. So let's talk first about your last part of the question, which is the age of being more mindful. The pelvic floor works in a system, right? I'm not a mechanic at all, but if I were a mechanic, I know that if something's wrong with the engine, that it's one part is messed up, then the entire engine is not going to work well, right? Because it's a system. So if something's messed up in the system, then the whole system's going to go down. So our bodies are not quite that delicate. They're pretty smart, and they're able to overcome some of these issues. But the reason I say that is because we should start thinking about our entire body system and our pelvic system, which includes breathing, stress release, or being able to manage stress. Like these things really affect how your pelvic floor muscles work. So we should be teaching kids this in kindergarten, right? I'm really a huge advocate. You don't have to say anything about the pelvic floor, but teaching children how to breathe properly, how to manage feelings so that they're not trapped inside of those muscles there and cause issues later on. Like these are super important lessons that I fear we're just not getting enough of. I hope I'm wrong with that. But so I think that mindfulness of your body should start very, very, very young, and that it's okay to wonder about your body, and it's okay to touch and feel and look and see and just know what's normal for you, because we don't always know what's normal for us because we're kind of told not to do those things, right? As far as Kegel exercises, right? If everything is fine, then your body should be working exactly the way that it should. You shouldn't have to exercise those muscles because they should be working like your deep hip muscles or your glute muscles or your ab muscles. They should just turn on when they're supposed to turn on and turn off when they're supposed to turn off, right? That's the healthy system. We shouldn't have to be exercising them. The problem is that we live in a very sedentary lifestyle here, and we have other things that happen to us, and those muscles become abnormal in that they're just not doing their job, right? They're not doing what they're supposed to be doing. So then that's when we have to do the exercises to bring those muscles back into a normal state, not to get them stronger. People will use those words, but the problem is that they're not in a normal state. So we got to do exercises to do that. Just like if I were to break my arm and I was in a cast for 6 weeks, and then they take the cast off and my arm is itty bitty, right? Because the muscles haven't been worked. So I have to do exercises to work those muscles to get them back into their normal state. So Kegels are a type of exercise. Sometimes it's great to do them because the muscles are not doing their job. They're on vacation, like they're in a beach somewhere drinking a 𝗦𝗨𝗕, right? And they need to get back on the clock. Sometimes the opposite is true, in that they're working overtime and they're what we call hypertonic, which just means that they're kind of stuck. They're not moving well. And if they're not moving well, they also can't do their job. So either way, they can't do their job. In one set, we really need Kegels to get them back into doing their job. The other set, we need Kegels too, but we don't need to keep tightening them because they're going to get stuck, right? So there are different strategies to use the Kegels. It's not just a one size fits all, which is why a lot of times you'll hear people say, oh, I did those Kegel exercises and they didn't work for me. And it's because probably your pelvic floor muscles were either stuck or you weren't doing them properly. It's kind of hard sometimes to isolate these muscles because there's a lot of them and you have to know which ones. And I don't know about you guys, but when I was in school, they never taught us how to squeeze our pelvic floor muscles. So we don't really know. And so we end up doing many other exercises instead of the proper ones to control. I don't know. Did that answer your question?
I'm honestly, I've learned from you, and I'm sure so many viewers will learn from you, just the fact of, I think Kegel and the word proactive go together. And from what I'm hearing from you, if it's correct, it's not necessarily needed unless you have an issue per se. If your system's working, focus on something else to be. I mean, and when I say proactive, that too, I think like you, system-wise, you want to be proactive in your health, in your activity, in your hydration. All of that comes into play. But I'm learning from you, Juanita.
I mean, and everybody has their own approach. I am very holistic in my approach in that I want your body to get back to its natural rhythm. Right? We want your body to be in its most natural state because your body is way smarter than you are and it knows what it's supposed to do. Right? Like all I do, and I tell people that all I do is just try to guide you back. Your body and your brain, they know what they're supposed to do. These are just actions to help remind your brain how things are supposed to work together. Because, I mean, you know, it knows that you're not supposed to be leaking all the time. Right? Your body knows that. And so it's just a matter of like, how do we connect the dots so that the brain will again recognize how to limit that leakage?
Yeah. One quick question. How would someone know if their feelings are trapped in their muscles? You made reference to that earlier.
Okay, I always tell people that the pelvic floor muscles are very emotional muscles. Here's why. Because we are the most vulnerable in our pelvis, right? I mean, think about it. Like in general in life, that's where we're the most vulnerable. This is where life and death activities happen. If we can't go to the bathroom, if we can't have bowel movements, like everything will shut down in our bodies eventually, right? That's how we eliminate waste. This is where we have sex and where our sexual function is really important. And we're not going to go into all this, but our sexual function is very heavily tied into our identity as a person and who we are. And there's so much emotional, effort into being a sexual person too. So we're very vulnerable in this area. If you are stressed, a couple of things can happen. First of all, if you're stressed here, and everybody knows what I'm talking about, up here in your neck, if you're stressed here, you're going to be stressed in your pelvic floor. Okay? That's how you know if feelings are trapped in there. They're going to be stressed in your pelvic floor because your pelvic floor is reacting to that. It wants to protect you. And the only way that our muscles know how to protect us is to contract, right? To guard. And so they can get stuck in there. You'll find that you don't move quite as easily as you once did. Like things just you're stiffer. It's harder to get up and down off the floor maybe. Those are some practical symptoms of that. But if you find that you're holding your breath or you're a shallow breather, right, that is also a sign that the pelvic floor is not going to be working well, because there's this beautiful relationship between our breathing and our pelvic floor that when we breathe, our diaphragm comes down and our pelvic floor muscles also come down. So they're doing this all day long. But if you're breathing very shallow, then your pelvic muscles are not getting the range that they need to get. So, and that can happen the other way too. So if your pelvic floor muscles are stressed, then it's going to affect what's going on up here too, right? So you could be breathing shallow because your pelvic floor muscles are tight. So there's all these crazy relationships that are amazing and interesting to me. But to answer your question is basically if you're, I would say on a practical level, if you're just feel tight, you're not moving, you're uncomfortable, or if you feel overly emotional, like during sex or when you have a bowel movement. I know that sounds funny, but it's true. If you feel like a lot of emotions with that, it can be the release of the tension in your pelvic floor that is creating this emotional release as well.
I have a question that I think a lot of viewers are going to want to know if there, and I'm sure there's nothing that has a quick answer.
I will
But
try.
all right. No. I don't mean that to it. Your answers are awesome. I just mean in general, because it's complex. It's a system. So I could talk, this could be called continence dialogue for 120 minutes. And I don't think any viewer would ever be bored with it. It's interesting. And I think it's stuff that people want to know and is so helpful, but it's hard sometimes to get close to a physical therapist or even a doctor to have that time. So we appreciate this time, and I know our viewers will too, Juanita. Okay, I know a lot of people. I'm gonna even chat about my friends. A lot of people could be out for a walk. Everything's fine on the walk. As soon as you get home and you're getting the key in the door or monitor system, the keypad going, all of a sudden the urge to go. Or you could be fine going grocery shopping, you pull into that driveway. What is that? What is that all about? Okay,
so if you have that, just so you know, you can blame your parents probably. Okay. because when we were children, we're taught a lot. Oh, you need to go to the bathroom. You need to go to the bathroom. Everybody's so afraid that you're going to pee your pants, right? So you need to go to the bathroom before you leave the house. You need to go to the bathroom before we leave the store. We need to go to the bathroom. It's constantly, no, it's not the parents' fault. They don't know. Although now it is my mission to tell parents not to do this to their children. So I'm glad we get talking about this. But what happens is we get an overactivation of the nervous system. So basically your nerves are telling you, I need to go to the bathroom. I need to go to the bathroom. Even if you don't have to really go, like if your bladder doesn't need to empty, the urge is or can be separate from the actual emptying of the bladder. So some people will get that big urge and then they'll go to the bathroom and they'll have like 3 or 4 drops. They'll be like, what? I thought I really had to go. But it's because your brain is interpreting the signal as I have to go to the bathroom when really it's, I just need to get in the house. Or here's an interesting story. I had a patient a while ago. She told me that whenever I asked her about that very urge, she goes, every time I put my key in the door, I had to go to the bathroom, which by the way is why I do what I do, because I had the very same issue. And that's why it was interesting to me. Every time I would pull in the driveway, I almost could not make it to the bathroom. Sometimes I didn't make it to the bathroom. But she told me every time she put the key in the door, she had to rush to the bathroom. And she goes, then she moved houses and it didn't happen anymore. Because the cue wasn't there, right? The signal wasn't there, which is the key in that door at that time. So when she removed the cue because she went to a different house, then no longer did she have that.
Wow.
So it's conditioning. It's conditioning. And you can uncondition yourself to do it too. And we teach some strategies on how to do that. But yeah, I think that's the easiest one to actually get over, is to do that.
Interesting. And do you think in terms of incontinence, I've often thought about this, and I think I've brought it up on other Continence Chat segments. I've often thought that part of the stigma around incontinence not only ties with what you're saying, that would be part A, mom or dad saying, we got to go before we leave, but no matter what age we are, religion, economic condition, it doesn't matter. As a human race, from day one, when we turn whatever it is, I've lost track now, but 9 months, a year, 18 months, whatever it is, with a young kid who's being potty trained, we, the parents, right, make such a big deal. We're calling grandma, we're buying Johnny a truck. I mean, right, where it's, oh my gosh, did you hear? This is big doings, big doings, big doings. That
Right.
I think that is really the first major, we make it a major accomplishment. And then I think if it reverts for a million different reasons back, you can have that group. And we're trying to break down stigmas, which this show truth is really all about. Do you think that, I'm just curious for your honest opinion, does that tie to stigma?
You know, I hadn't thought of it that way, but it completely makes sense. I mean, I think that that is a very reasonable explanation, right? Because after a certain point, once you're potty trained, then you're supposed to be potty trained for life, right? Or so you think that you're supposed to be potty trained for life. And then something happens and now you're not. So what does that say about you as a human? Like you pointed out, oh, you can't even control yourself. Like you're a baby, right? You're a child because you no longer are in control of your bathroom habits. And I think that that's a really great point that you make. I absolutely think that's my own personal opinion. Yeah, I mean, I definitely see it play out in people feeling so bad about themselves because they're not able to control. Now, it's worse. I feel like it's worse in men than it is in women. I feel like men have a harder time because I feel like women, they say, oh, I've had 12 babies or 6 babies, so it's normal for me to leak whenever I laugh and cough and sneeze because everybody does it, which it means that there's something that's wrong, right? Those muscles are not doing what they're supposed to do, and it can affect other parts of the system. But women have kind of been poo-pooed around for a long time in the medical system, and they haven't gotten the real answers. But when it comes to, I think women accept it more, and they're just like, oh, well, it's just normal and natural part of aging, which it isn't, but that's what they think. Whereas men, they know when things work and when things don't. And when they don't work, they're not very happy about it, right? They don't really know how to always handle that. Yeah. Women spend the majority of our lives figuring out what the heck is happening down there, through one way or another. Men don't always have that. And so I think it's actually a little bit harder on men than it is on women to kind of deal with that and not being able to control that part of your body.
Interesting. Great insights. Really.
I mean, I think you just brought up a really great point. I think I'll think about that a little bit more and percolate on it a bit. It's great.
Yeah. Well, great. Susie, do you have any final questions? I know we're getting late in the hour here, but again, I could just talk with the two of you for hours about this stuff.
Yeah, I'm just so appreciative, Juanita. I feel like you've given all of us hope and lots to think about, really connecting the dots. It's not just an isolated incident, but the feelings, the emotions, the nervous system, it's all connected. And I'm just thrilled to hear about what you're doing, the impact that you're having on your community. And I think our viewers would probably like to meet Sam and learn about his goals for the new year.
Yeah, I mean, Sam has some ambitious goals in that he's trying to build more muscle. That seems to be one of the top New Year's resolutions. So that's his goal, is to try to work and put on some muscle mass. We'll see if he's successful or not. I don't know. I kind of have my doubts, but don't tell him. We don't want to discourage him.
So Sam is the skeleton standing behind you. Okay.
Got it.
Thank you.
How can people reach you, even if they're not physically in the Claremont area, if they were interested, for example, in receiving your newsletter? What would be a good way, and we'll get it up on the screen when we put this out for people, but what would be a good way for people to reach you?
Sure. The best way is to go to our website, which is athenapt.com. And there is an opportunity that you can just sign up for the monthly newsletter, and it will provide lots of good information about pelvic issues in general, pelvic health, as well as some overall health. Sam has his own segment. We talk about some other options that we have for people to come. Restorative yoga is one of them. I know if they're not in the area, that may not be an option, but it might be an option somewhere where people are, is to look at some restorative yoga, some ways to kind of get some of these emotions out of your body that can be trapped in there. But we also have like monthly book recommendations. So every month we recommend a book that you can read. In January this month, it's In Praise of Walking. So it's talking about the benefits of walking and just how, because that also is very beneficial to your pelvic floor muscles. So yeah, so there's lots of good stuff in the newsletter. So you can just go to our website and click on the button there and sign up, and we'd be happy to send that to you.
Super, super. Well, we can't thank you enough. Honestly, this has been fun and insightful and good content, and we appreciate you very much.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, both of you. It's been lovely, and I always enjoy chatting about all the wonders of the body and the pelvic floor.
Super. Thanks everyone for listening today. We appreciate it.